Welcome everyone to today's webinar, CMS Price Transparency Primer, How to Meet the Challenge of the New Rule and Turn Compliance into Competitive Advantage. I am Ayla Ellison with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We are looking forward to hearing your questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. At this time, it is now my pleasure to start today's webinar by introducing our presenters. Our three presenters today are Ian Ha, Head of Partnerships at Cedar, Amy Stillman, Head of Design at Cedar, and Errol Lido, Co-founder of Cedar. At this time, I'm pleased to turn the floor over to Ian to begin today's presentation.
All right. Good morning. Thank you, Ayla. And thank you to the Becker's organization for allowing us to have this platform, as well as providing great thought leadership opportunities and education to the healthcare continuum. So really appreciate being here today. Happy Wednesday, everyone. We have a lot to cover in this hour, so we'll try to go here and go forward. So the first thing is the three main questions that we'll answer today around price transparency are, number one, what exactly is the CMS price transparency rule? What does it require of my organization, of my health system or provider organization? Number two, what are some general product and design best practices to really engage patients in the right way, in the optimal way? And then three, how can we kind of meet those requirements of the rule in a very results-oriented way that also enhances overall patient financial experience? We believe at Cedar that we can enhance the patient experience as well as actually enhance financial conversion simultaneously without having to trade off one for other. How can we do that? Today are the three questions we'll try to get to. Okay, so quickly, an agenda of what we'll cover in this webinar today. Number one, we'll do introductions. We'll introduce ourselves as the speakers and members of Cedar. We'll also do a brief introduction of what Cedar does as a company and our perspective and our expertise. Then we'll go into an actual background and context of the CMS rule around price transparency. What does it mean? What are the implications? What do we have to do? A step-by-step guide around that. Some design philosophies and principles that we would like to click into. And then hopefully at the end of this webinar, we'll have a time for folks to ask any relevant questions and provide answers. So without further ado, I'd just love to introduce ourselves or the Cedar team to you. My name is Ian Ha. I lead our sales and partnerships efforts at Cedar. I've been in health tech for about 18 years, 6 years at Cerner Corporation, 7 years at Athena Health, and then a few years at Flatiron Health and Kairos. And I'm very, very glad to be here with you all today. I'm also based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I have 3 children under 6 years old, of which I hope none of them enter my office during this webinar for you good people. So glad to be here, and I'll turn to Errol.
Great. I'm Errol Lido. I'm the co-founder of Cedar, and I lead our makers team at Cedar, which includes the engineering, product, design, and data science functions. And prior to founding Cedar, I led product teams in advertising, technology, and finance at companies such as AppNexus and Bridgewater Associates.
Hi, I'm Amy Stillman. I'm the head of design at Cedar. My specialty is transforming complex data problems into delightful experiences. Previously, I've done so in ad tech at mParticle, creating marketing tools for Airbnb and Spotify, and also in consulting for Verizon, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Eli Lilly.
Great, thanks, Amy. Okay, so before we kind of jump into the nitty-gritty of the price transparency rule and the like, we'd like to just give you a quick overview of what Cedar is, what our area of expertise is, and why we have a specific perspective on this topic. And so first of all, our point of view at Cedar is to deliver actual meaningful price transparency to your patients. You actually need to be able to engage them. They actually need to be able to see and act upon the transparency that you provide, right? So to that end, we actually have created a unified solution around healthcare consumer engagement that spans the visit settings of post-visit and all the way into pre-visit. So, 90% of financial engagement happens, say, in healthcare on this post-visit side. of the spectrum, but the desire to roll that out pre-visit and engage with patients meaningfully around financial matters before they come in is a strong desire and need in the healthcare market. We built that using a platform approach, and we'll probably double-click onto a couple areas of why we think we're different, specifically from a consumer-driven lens, as well as a data science or personalization lens. Right? So all of our engagements are powered by that platform, which we'll also go into further in the next couple slides. So first, we believe that a standout user experience is really required to actually get engagement. Right? So it is one thing to provide the information that's out there, but it is another thing for a user to actually be able to see it, interpret it, acknowledge it, and act upon it. And so our philosophy is remove as many barriers to entry as possible. Right? So our platform has no app to download, no username or password required to sign up. It is completely white label with the organization, so the provider organization owns the patient experience at the end of the day. And so we really believe that kind of taking a world-class, best-in-class design and data science approach really drives that engagement financially. Right? So it should be as easy to use and pay your bill or engage financially as it is to click a movie on Netflix or purchase something on Amazon is essentially our philosophy and why we think we stand out a bit. Secondly, the way we're able to personalize the experience, right? So we understand that in order to be meaningful and relevant for patients, that engagement should be highly personalized to the type of consumer that you are trying to engage, right? So kind of going beyond just simple segmentation, we actually take several data sources, and we can explain this here in a second, of how we personalize the financial journey for a patient. So we essentially at Cedar, we take three main data sets and buckets of data and combine them to inform our algorithms. So the first is around EHR, core billing software data. We take that, we combine that with essentially third-party or external databases, and then we combine that with actual behavioral data to personalize this journey. So what did they actually do? What did they click on? What did they not click on? What time of day? What day of week are they engaging? Are they engaging via text? Are they engaging via email? Are they engaging via paper statement? All of those factors we kind of digest into our platform to essentially personalize the billing experience for the patient. So I've outlined kind of an example here of, you have two different patients, two different demographics, whether it's a BAI type payment after insurance or a true self-pay with a certain balance range, with a certain median household income, can all inform ways of how we outreach to that patient, what options we present. Do you present discounts? What type of language do you use and things like that to personalize that financial experience. Next, let me go into a little bit of the results of the platform. So we believe that inherently the thesis is if you can increase that experience, you can increase engagement, which ultimately leads to increased results as well, right? And so all of our clients have seen kind of this minimum bump of 30% increase in patient collections, which we believe is one of the fastest growing segments as a payer. We also see a high level of digital self-service and digital engagement north of 70% plus. Right? So we know that the tech is working. We know that folks are engaging because it is consumer-driven and because it is personalized. And we believe patients are actually enjoying this process as we see a 95% patient satisfaction rating through Cedar. So ultimately, we believe that great design and relevant outreach through personalization actually moves the needle on engagement. And we believe those are actually required to truly move the needle on price transparency with patients and engaging them financially. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Errol to actually go through a little bit of the details of the CMS price transparency rule, give you some background and context, what it means for you and your organization. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ian. So I'm going to share a little bit of background and context on our main topic, which is the new hospital price transparency rule from CMS. So just for quick context, in November 2019, the Trump administration announced the new price transparency rule. The stated goal of this rule is to introduce more price pressure into the market by giving consumers the ability to shop around for care and have visibility into both what they and their insurance companies are paying for care. The analogy that the CMS Secretary Seema Verma used was about buying a car. You wouldn't buy a car without knowing the price, so why are healthcare prices hidden? That's really the spirit of the legislation that's being introduced. So let's go into what the rule actually requires. So CMS says that the intention is to give patients the ability to have more information, shop around for care. But if you're at all familiar with the rule, then you'll know that it requires a lot of details that don't necessarily relate to patient out-of-pocket costs, and that patients may not be familiar with all the costs involved. So there are two primary provisions. And the first is that hospitals or healthcare providers will need to provide a comprehensive machine-readable file. I believe that the proposed legislation also says that they're considering whether to extend this further to require actual programmatic access through things like APIs to this data as well. And the second major tenet of this is what the ruling calls shoppable services. So hospitals must prominently surface at least 300 of these services in a consumer-friendly manner for patients. And 70 of these services are stipulated by CMS. I don't think they've actually defined specifically what those are, but they will define at least 70 of these services where pricing must be defined to consumers. And the additional 230 are at the discretion of the healthcare provider. And shoppable in this case is designated by CMS to mean services that can be scheduled in advance. So these are things like MRIs or planned surgeries or procedures. There are a bunch of other nuanced details to this. I should note quickly that we actually have a detailed checklist on the Cedar website. If you search for Cedar price transparency, you can sign up and download it. I think that there are something like 100 items, more granular items on the checklist. It goes into a lot more detail. Unfortunately, we don't have time to cover all of these on the call today. But I think it is worth investigating a little bit about what these standard charges are and what the definition of this is. So the definition of standard charges in this case is very, very clearly defined as it relates to the rule. As you'll notice, it poses a challenge because it requires including a lot of information that is not directly relevant to the patient and actually understanding what is relevant to them in terms of their out-of-pocket costs. So it includes more than just basic price transparency information. So standard charges must include the following. It has to include the gross charge, it's the actual charge master price, payer-specific negotiated charges, so all negotiated rates with individual payers for those 300 services, discounted cash prices, if any discounted cash prices available for self-pay patients, and de-identified minimum and maximum negotiated charges with payers. So the lowest charge that a hospital has negotiated with all third-party payers for an item or service, as well as the maximum charge. And that's not all. Standard charges must also include corresponding plain language descriptions. So the spirit of this is that they must be easily understood by consumers and made available in a way that consumers will easily understand them. Billing codes and revenue codes must also be included where applicable. The locations in which a service is provided, especially if pricing is different across locations or could be different, and a list of ancillary items and services that typically accompany these services in question. So for instance, if a procedure requires anesthesia, that must also be included in the pricing information. So let's talk for a minute about compliance and who needs to comply and by when. So this rule mainly applies to hospitals as defined as Medicare participation and state and local regulation. And the deadline for compliance is January 1st, 2021. And after such time, hospitals will face financial penalties up to $300 per day, so about $110,000 annually if they don't comply. That doesn't seem like that much in the grander scheme of things, but CMS has made it pretty clear that they will enforce this. Their intention is to find more impactful ways to enforce it if they don't see compliance. It is worth noting that there is a pending lawsuit. And so there's a hospital, there are two actually pending there's one pending lawsuit, which is the hospital rule lawsuit. So in December 2019, several hospital associations and individual hospitals, including the American Hospital Association, filed a lawsuit to block the price transparency rule, arguing that the rule exceeds CMS's legal authority. So this is still ongoing. We think it's likely that there will probably be compromises and changes, but CMS seems pretty set on passing through this regulation, and there does seem to be bipartisan support for it. The second thing to mention is that there is also a payer companion rule. So while this ruling directly relates to hospitals and healthcare providers, a proposed additional ruling would also affect payers as well. It would require health insurers to disclose out-of-pocket costs for all services, as well as cost-sharing information to participants upfront. The comment period for that rule ended on January 29th, 2020, so the final rule is expected to be released in the coming months. You should hear more about that soon. So our position on this is that there's a lot of technicality to this regulation, but backing up for a minute, we feel that regardless of how the financial regulatory details shake out, this is likely to be an area that there is going to be continued regulation around. And it's actually significantly in the benefit of consumers to provide more cost transparency here. I think almost everyone agrees that the current situation is unsustainable, and a higher degree of price transparency is coming one way or another in the next several years. Most importantly, we think this is a good thing because price transparency matters to patients. It's important to give people the ability to plan for their financial obligations in healthcare. We know that in the status quo, many people will intentionally avoid seeking out care because they're worried about unknown costs. With the rise of high deductible plans, out-of-pocket costs have skyrocketed for patients over the last decade. About 94% of American consumers are now worried about their rising healthcare costs over the next 5 years. And they're attempting to manage their costs more proactively and shop around for care. While this is still in the early days, about 3.5 times more Americans shopped for care in 2018 than they did in 2012. So in general, we think that regardless of how this regulation shakes out, this is an area that every healthcare provider, to some extent health insurers, should be paying attention to and investing in solutions for. We think that, as I mentioned, the status quo is not where we as an industry need it to be. It's very difficult in the current status quo for patients and consumers to easily and accurately obtain price estimates. Even more than that, we know that passively just offering estimator tools somewhere on a website doesn't really truly drive patient interaction and engagement. So to truly engage patients at scale, you actually need to proactively push this information to them. About 60% of consumers report requesting price estimates, but more than half of those who requested estimates were not able to get this information easily or accurately. And in many cases, they have to talk to multiple parties to get this information. We all know that charge masters are relatively meaningless, and 1 in 3 leading health systems do not have any sort of estimation tools. So this is an extremely important area that we should all be investing in. In general, we think that this goes hand in hand by providing an improved experience for consumers. That actually improves engagement and can also improve financial results. And we're actually seeing this today at Cedar with the partners that we work with. We found that by improving the consumer engagement experience, patients are actually much happier, and you can actually meaningfully improve financial results as well. So with this, I'm going to hand over to Amy, who's going to talk about some of the design implications of this.
Awesome. So what Errol just described is actually just a big product and design problem. And there's a lot of challenges in that. But I also think that there's some opportunities. The challenges are pretty clear. Users might face information overload, sticker shock, and confusion by non-applicable prices, or failure to capture the patient interest to have them follow up on the next steps. I like to think about this kind of like if I went to a nice restaurant and there weren't prices on the menu, I might be really distracted and not be able to concentrate on the meal. So actually, by providing transparency, we actually can help people concentrate on their care. And there's some opportunities there. So relevant pricing information really empowers patients and builds trust. Clear communication about out-of-pocket estimates can take financial fear out of going to the doctor. We all know that sometimes we use Dr. Google and whatnot when we're worried about pricing. And also, we have the ability to capture patients' interest and convert them into new patients and utilize their healthcare better. I'll kind of take a step back and just talk a little bit about design at Cedar. In design at Cedar, we kind of have 3 goals when we design anything. So first and foremost, when we're designing, we want to think about empathy. Definitely always we think about accessibility, inclusivity, and also being mobile first. I'll walk through those a little bit more in detail. So empathy. So why does it matter that we build products with empathy in mind? I think, if we just think about being a patient and having this critical time when you're dealing with your health, it's often really sensitive and potentially painful. So having empathy actually lets us build trust with patients. I think that's really important actually right now. So we want to make sure that healthcare bills don't add stress to an already stressful situation. We actually did a really cool piece of design research this year with the research firm IDEO. We talked to a behavioral psychologist as well as a hostage negotiator about how people behave in stressful situations. What we learned is that when people are stressed, they tend to actually block out logical decisions, and they revert to something that we called as their lizard brains, and that they react emotionally at times rather than rationally. And as a result, they shut down and disengage. So we want to have empathy in our design so people feel supported and they actually engage with us. And to do this, and to keep my design team accountable, we have an empathy scorecard. So let me talk a little bit about how we make sure that this is built into our designs. So within our empathy scorecard, you can definitely see that look and feel is definitely a piece of that. So we choose colors and palettes that feel calming. Our copy and how we talk to users, we try to address users personally. We say, "Good afternoon, Susan," making sure that we address her like a person. Also, with our kind of calls to actions and headlines, we use sentence case, so we try not to use cap case or things that actually shout at users and may feel aggressive. We want to make sure that there's always access to help so people feel supported, especially in these times of need when things can be really confusing and often stressful. Our second goal always is accessibility and inclusivity, and this is actually really important. 1 in 4 adults actually live with a disability. And disabilities, there's actually a full range of disabilities. So some disabilities are actually situational or temporary, right? So a permanent disability might be like you're losing a limb or losing an arm. A situational disability actually might be that you're pregnant you're a new mother and you just had a baby and your hands are full. And a temporary disability might be that you've broken your arm and so your arm's in a cast. So actually, when we design for everyone in mind, we actually make sure that the experience is pleasant and usable. I often equate it to escalators or elevators, right? So escalators in the subway or in the mall, everyone enjoys using them. They definitely help our counterparts that may have trouble walking upstairs, but in general, they make the experience more pleasant for everyone. I'll walk through, so similarly, we have an accessibility scorecard. So I'll walk through a little bit about how we bake accessibility and inclusivity into our designs. First of all, we want to make sure that things are distinguishable. So color contrast is really important, whether you have partial eyesight, color blindness, or you're using a monochrome display. It's important to make sure that the colors have contrast so that people can understand where we're directing them towards the different actions on the screen. Similarly, text size and weight are really important. When we talk about inclusivity, we often talk about designing for everyone, that people come from different walks of life, right? Like everyone is a patient. So age is a really big factor in there. Making sure that we have text sizes with heavy weights in the fonts helps people read the information on the screen better. We also make sure that the site has constant navigation, and we provide users a way to find content. This starts to create a mental model in their head about how to use the site and go back and forth. So we put certain actions in similar places so that it's easy to find. We also make sure that elements are predictable and consistent in this way. So helping users, again, to have clear headlines that are short and easy to read and scannable often helps users use our site and make the usability really stand out. Our third kind of design goal always is being mobile first. People are 2 times more likely to make a payment after getting an email. I like to call these small moments. So in those 15 minutes between walking from the subway to my office or between meetings, that's when people check emails. That's when they're checking their personal email account. So if we can capture them in those moments and actually help them pay their bills, that's really important. And we know actually that 11% of mobile payments are actually made via Apple Pay. So people really like that easy-to-use, quick workflows that we can supply. In saying that, again, we always have a mobile scorecard as well when we design. So what does it mean to be mobile first? Mobile first actually means that we start our designs on smaller screens. We design with the mobile phone in mind. That makes sure that we put content first. We don't want people scrolling and scrolling, trying to find what to do next. So making sure the most relevant content is above the fold to let the user understand what's happening on the page. Again, text size is really important on a mobile phone. There's less content on the page. Doesn't mean that we should, try to cram in really small text sizes, making sure text sizes are readable. Hit zones are really important. So hit zones are actually the tappable area, right? With our mobile phones, we're using our fingers, so we need bigger hit areas. As you can see in those form fields, those feel very clickable. Similarly with hit zones, I'm sure you can all appreciate this. We've all probably used an application on our mobile phone where you've tried to click something and actually clicked a different button. Oftentimes this happens with maps that are embedded into sites. It's difficult to actually click on the location. You might be clicking something else. And again, we want to have a guided flow. So making sure that our steps are sequential, that our users can kind of click through the rest of the journey, and they're never really left off in the experience. Now we'll talk a little bit more, kind of a step-by-step guide about how we actually tackled price transparency. Granted, this is just a concept, and so I'll kind of highlight 4 key moments and how we thought about that with price transparency. So personalizing the price. So the rule requires that we disclose all payer-specific negotiated rates, and we also have to disclose these rates even when a person is trying to find a shoppable service. So if we think about this, this would actually be a huge table, which would be really, really difficult for a user to find exactly the rate that was meant for them. So when we start this process, we actually start with personalizing the price. We ask the user, what is your insurance, or upload your insurance card, so that we make sure that we show the prices that are only relevant to them. So this opportunity here is actually to make sure that the user feels like, I'm looking at prices that are relevant to me. We're also providing them with a guided workflow to make sure that they understand what to do next, and that the insurance is really relevant to them. Step 2, we definitely want to make it easy. So with these shoppable services, there's so much information that we can display. I think the main thing that we looked at this and that the challenge was is how do we display this service and kind of use plain language to help people find what they're looking for. So I think of this challenge as kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you're using this self-checkout area, and you might have an orange. And do you look up the orange by using the code, or do you just type in orange? So here again, similarly, like by using plain text and making sure that users know what these services are and surfacing that first helps them navigate the experience. So we kind of hold all the CPT codes and other language for a later screen after the user has found what they want. So here you can kind of see kind of that guided step-by-step experience, really making it easy. We have a smart search menu at the top. We have popular searches. We have filters, really trying to make it obvious with type ahead for the user to find the service that they need. Showcasing your value. So the rule requires that we surface all standard charges for patients, including gross, payer-specific negotiated rates, discounted cash prices, de-identified minimum negotiated charges, and de-identified maximum negotiated charges. This is a lot of information. And we actually know that 54% of patients will opt to receive care for a particular facility because it's associated with the brand. So as the pricing information could be confusing and overwhelming, there's actually a moment here in which we can surface relevant information about why this particular brand is better at something or has the best technology. So in step 3, you can really see when we designed the screen, we left an area at the top of the screen to kind of showcase that value, to have a photo of maybe your state-of-art technology and your facility to make sure users understand where it is in the location, and that might be of value to them because it's their neighborhood place. And we also try to showcase the relevant pricing information at the top. So we're highlighting the $300 is actually the out-of-pocket maximum. We're making sure that that pricing information is top of mind. We also have the rest of the details in kind of a progressive disclosure design where the user can open up and find out more information. But I think part of this is really making sure that the value stands out and that it's clear and concise at the top of the page. Step 4, connecting to the patient journey. We actually aren't required to do this by the rule, but we think it's really important to help users continue on their journey. So with this, we make sure that on the next page, you can see that we make sure that the user has follow-up actions. So after they've found the facility, they've found their shoppable service, they then can text the estimate to themselves or book an appointment. So this is making sure that we have a seamless, connected experience, and we're helping our users to the next part of their journey. I think you can think about this too as shopping. If you've done the work to go on Amazon, search for the product that you want, read some reviews, you've decided to buy that, you should be able to add that to your cart. So it seems natural for us to connect the patient to the rest of their journey here. Cedar's approach. Yeah, I think we'll pass back to Ian at this point.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Let me see if I can advance the slide. Okay. So hopefully, just through this, the last 2 speakers, you were able to get a good synopsis on what the CMS price transparency rule and the details are from Errol, as well as some just best-in-class design approaches of how you can better engage patients in a consumer kind of driven world through Amy. We'd love to kind of double-click a little bit on our approach to it as well, and a little bit more of what we're doing specifically around engaging and providing transparency to patients before we go into a time of Q&A. So like I shared before, Cedar is a true end-to-end patient financial engagement platform for providers, right? So we have the post-visit setting, the pre-visit setting, the point-of-service setting. We have all those things where patients are engaging from a financial standpoint with a provider. We have an omni-channel approach to this, right? So we provide all of the traditional modes of communicating with a patient or providing a bill or an invoice, right? So we send the paper statement, we do the email bill, we do the mobile digital outreach, which we have a high focus on at Cedar. We also have, pay by phone, IVR type of technology. And all of those technologies are powered by our platform where we have, kind of our data science models informing the ways we outreach, how we outreach, what we say. We have our design that Amy had just talked about and how we think about design in order to actually get folks to do certain behavioral tasks that we would that the provider would want them to do. The other thing I'll mention here is that the scalable integrations. So we are essentially EHR or core system agnostic. So we have integrations to Cerner, Epic, Athena Health, Centricity, et cetera. And we believe that these solutions could be complemented and augmented using a combination of technologies. So we're agnostic to that approach, and we provide kind of that omni-channel mode of communication powered by the platform. Okay. Next, around the engagement platform. So increasing access to price transparency and devising kind of that mechanism to actually get patients to engage with it is absolutely on the roadmap, and we have client partners going live with these features in the summer this year. Our fundamental approach is based on really engaging those patients and serving as like that consumer-centric go-between between the provider organization and your patients. Right? So Cedar is a B2B2C model where we partner with provider organizations, but ultimately it's patients and consumers that use the technology. And on that roadmap, you can see things that include such as appointment reminders, registration forms, consent captures for email and text and things like that, insurance capture, price estimates, and things of that nature. And again, all of those types of features are again, powered by how we should engage intuitive design, when we should engage, and the like, to provide kind of these streamlined patient intake features. And so ultimately, the goal is to provide kind of that greater transparency level to patients, but also provide it in a way that the patients will truly engage with it, right? To empower that patient kind of at each stage of that care journey, whether it's post-visit, whether it's pre-visit, and communicate kind of the up-to-date price estimates that folks are required to bring and actually want to bring to the patient community in order to capture market share, in order to drive better results, and ultimately in order to actually increase the patient experience of folks that enter into your provider organization, right? So everyone knows kind of the angst of potential medical debt or patient responsibility that continually increases, you know, at a skyrocket rate, right? Deductibles, co-insurance, et cetera, have grown 200% plus over the last 5 years. And in order to improve or move the needle on the experience of that, we need to provide kind of that greater transparency at a stage of where people will actually see it and do something with it. And so that is the ultimate goal that we are trying to do and elevate that patient financial experience at Cedar. And so before we kind of get into some of the Q&A that I think we can touch on, and hopefully we can give some time back before the lunch hour this morning, two action items. So number one, please digest kind of the information from today around the price transparency content that we gave. Think about the design. We love to hear feedback, both you know, good and bad. We love to hear both, but thoughts on how we're doing our approach as well. And then please get to know us. Contact at cedar.com is the email that you can email if you have any interest in getting to know us further. And so we would love to meet you, speak with you, hear your take on how you're approaching price transparency at your organizations, how you think about design as well, and we'd love to get in touch with you. So without further ado, I think we'll probably turn it back over to Ayla to facilitate a little bit of Q&A, and we'll take it from there.
Great. Thank you, Ian, Amy, and Errol for that fantastic presentation. We will now begin today's question and answer session. Please submit any questions you have by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your dashboard, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we have time for today. We already have several questions that have come through, so we'll go ahead and get started with those now. In the first question for our presenters today is, how do you know that these design principles and techniques actually work, and also how do you measure them?
Oh, yep. So the reason we actually don't know that they work off the bat. We do a ton of research and testing. So we talk to users often and try to understand their mental model, as well as when we make designs. We do user testing before we launch and after we launch. After we launch, we actually do A/B testing. A fun fact is that the design team actually sits next to the data science team at Cedar. So we're constantly validating our designs and trying to understand what moves the needle and what speaks to people and what actually works.
Thank you so much, Amy. And moving on to the next question that has come through. This question is, even with an online price estimator tool available, we often see low patient adoption. How do you counteract this problem?
Yes, I can take that one. So, I mean, this is an extremely common issue. Use cases in healthcare tend to be very low frequency, and they're not exactly, you know, experiences that consumers are always excited about. So most health systems see extremely low engagement on existing technology, particularly on patient portals, which require some sort of proactive behavior from patients. So in general, what we found is that you need a kind of smart strategies that are personalized to different subsegments of patient populations to ensure that they actually engage with the technology or the experience or in order to drive certain behaviors. So at Cedar, we put in incredible amount of investment into building rules-based engines that use machine learning to kind of tailor different experiences and outreach to patients based on different trigger events. We see that that meaningfully improves overall engagement. On average, we see that typical engagement somewhere in the 15 to 30% range, but if you're smart about proactive engagement strategies, you can get that up into 60 to 70% range on average.
Wow, thank you so much for kind of giving us some more details on how to get those adoption rates up. I have a few more questions that have come through. It looks like we have time for at least 2 more questions before we close things out today. But the next question, and I will direct this to all 3 of you, and whoever wants to jump in can. The question is, what do you see as the design goal that is most often overlooked in healthcare products?
Yeah, I think for our team, it's actually that the patient experience is really disconnected. So I think it's like, similarly to when you call the 1-800 line and maybe your flight was delayed and you have to constantly re-explain yourself and your situation, that's really tiresome for users. And so I think oftentimes we know the technology is fragmented for users, and that actually shows up in the experience, that users are constantly having to re-enter information and re-explain themselves and trying to find help especially. So I think the more we can kind of create a connected patient journey, the better that will be actually for patients overall. Yeah.
And maybe one thing I'd add to Amy is, coming from 15 years of EHR, and obviously that's a very necessary technology in the market. It is most often a great face-off between the clinician and not really ideal to kind of face off with the consumer, right? Yet alone like collect money from them or have them engage financially in some way. And so, from a design perspective, I think having kind of that consumer focus around, how do you engage people, that are competing with every other vertical in your life, right? That you deal with from a consumer standpoint, and doing that in a effective way to get results from a healthcare lens, we think is pretty overlooked as well.
Great, thank you both. And looks like we have time for one more question today. So I want to go ahead and move forward with that question. And the final question is, my organization has invested a lot of resources into making our patient portal our digital front door. For returning patients, do you envision the app that you presented being accessible via portals as well?
Yeah, so I can take that one. I think we got a few questions about, what we demoed being available sort of to embed in websites and in applications. So just want to make clear to reiterate that, solution we proposed is, still very much a prototype. We're working now with our first clients on these price transparency initiatives, but this is not currently live. However, Cedar's mission is to improve overall patient financial experience. With all of our products, part of that involves complementing our clients' existing patient workflows to deliver great digital experiences. So we are very much about making our experiences complementary with existing patient portals or digital front doors or websites or native applications as well. So if you're currently directing patients to an online portal or to a native app, we can absolutely work around that. Our goal is to supplement the native functionality of your system without disrupting the overall patient portal user experience. So we find that Cedar, in conjunction with existing patient portals and digital front doors, tends to boost overall engagement and drive better patient outcomes.
Great, thank you so much. And that is the last question that we're going to have time for today. But I did want to once again thank Ian, Amy, and Errol for their excellent presentation, and also thank Cedar for sponsoring today's webinar. To all of our participants signing in today, please enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.
Great, thanks everyone.